Hi, Mark, and today I want to talk about the local elections in England and, of course, the impact for the Tories. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party has suffered a crushing defeat in the local elections in England. Right now, when I'm filming, the Tories already lost more than 1,000 local council seats and the control over far more than half of the councils they controlled since the last election. And this made it clear for the first time since 2002, the opposition Labour Party is the strongest force in the country, having gained more than 500 seats at local level. The British had given Sunak a clear rejection, said a Labour spokesman. Some were already comparing the results to the 1996 local elections, which preceded the overwhelming Labour victory under ex-Prime Minister Tony Blair in the general election a year later. The vote was considered the first mood test for Sunak, and this time too, a parliamentary election will follow in just over a year. For example, Sky News correspondent Beth Rigby spoke of a nightmare scenario. With a bitter defeat, the Prime Minister, who had actually stabilized the party again in his almost 200 days in office, is also coming under pressure. After the scandals of his predecessors Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, Sunak managed to get the conversation going again, not just about people and their missteps, and the election result could now destroy the good mood they were in. Critics within the party accused the Prime Minister of lacking the campaign strength of his predecessor Johnson. Sunak appears deliberately relaxed and smart, and in his conversations with citizens, however, the wealthy ex-investment banker does not come across as, naturally as the down-to-earth populist Johnson. The British had given Sunak a clear rejection, said a Labour spokesman. Like the Liberal Democrats, who are traditionally strong in local elections, the party was able to gain ground across the country. The Social Democrats recaptured several old bastions that are considered Brexit strongholds and had recently switched to the Tories. They also triumphed in counties like East Staffordshire in the Midlands, which had been dominated by the Tories for decades. Labour leader Keir Starmer has chosen Medway for his first post-election day appearance on Thursday. Labour has not won in the constituency in the southeast of the country for a long time, but has finally won the local elections again. He thanked the campaigners and the candidates. He said, "You guys did a great job. You didn't just win, you brought Labour back with a bang." And he was quite beaming when he said that. And this is the constituency's first victory since 1998 for them. And that's the story the leader wants to underscore. Labour is winning again in the districts that may once have been Labour strongholds but have favoured Conservative voting in recent years. And Starmer wants to underscore that his party is on track to win the general election, probably at the end of 24 or the beginning of 25. Party leader Keir Starmer therefore sees his party on the way to a clear majority in Parliament. And meanwhile, Sunak said, "It's always disappointing to lose hard-working Conservative local councillors. However, he does not see any massive growth in a movement towards Labour." Oh boy. And Tory Secretary General Greg Hunt spoke of a massive wake-up call. "If we are going to stop Keir Starmer, we must be united." That's what he wrote in a newsletter. And as I said, Sky News correspondent Beth Rigby spoke of a nightmare scenario, and analyst John Curtis was more cautious on this. Whether this results point to a majority for Labour in the next general election remains to be seen, he said. Anyway, voters were called on Thursday to choose a total of 8,000 council members, and the election was the first major test of mood for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives after the turbulent times with Boris Johnson's resignation and Liz Truss' quite short tenure. People wanted the Conservatives to deliver, and Rishi Sunak said inflation halving, boosting the economy, shortening waiting lists for health services, and stopping refugee boats, that's what the voters wanted, and we are working hard on it. But what these elections show above all is that many no longer believe that the Conservatives are delivering on their promises and that they can redeem themselves. The waiting times in the health service are longer than ever. Inflation is leading to massively increasing interest rates on loans, and because many home loans are shorter than, for example, here in Germany, the burden on households increases significantly. Sunak, yes, he had been able to calm the party down in the past few weeks, and he finally managed to reach an agreement with the EU on the trade in goods with Northern Ireland. On the other hand, he had involved the extreme right-wing forces in the party by continuing the tough course of his predecessors in asylum policy and promising to protect refugees who crossed the English Channel in boats, not to protect them, to fly them out to Rwanda. And this should serve as a deterrent. And legally, these plans are controversial, and so far not a single flight has been carried out. The authorities are still unable to keep up with the processing of asylum applications, and there was a failure to set up shelters for refugees. But in a first reaction after the election, the Prime Minister was optimistic and spoke of good results in some hard-fought districts. But observers saw it differently. Today's local elections are a disaster for the Conservatives, emphasized the Byline Times portal. A scene with cabinet member Johnny Mercer reflected the mood almost symbolically. Yeah, I've seen that live. While the MP for Plymouth spoke live on BBC of a terrible night for his party, it was announced in the background that Labour would be in charge of the southern English port in the future. And loud cheers made Mercer swoon silent. The question of who is to blame for the election disaster could now lead to a new dispute in the Conservative Party. Voices are already being raised from the right wing that the overthrow of two prime ministers by the Sunak camp would nullify the Tories' mandate won by Boris Johnson in 2019. A clear edge is now the order of the day, but Sunak delivers super high taxes, high spending, open borders. That's at least what former MEP John Longworth criticized. And former Prime Minister Johnson has been lurking since his forced departure from Downing Street for a new chance, and short-term Prime Minister Truss is now speaking again. A grassroots conference has been announced for next week, and several Johnson supporters have announced to be there. Former Brexit Minister David Davis, on the other hand, is targeting the ex-Prime Ministers. It is obvious that we are paying the price for the end of the Boris Johnson and Liz Truss era, is what Davis said, and the party would now be punished for this. But the clear winner of the election is Labour. The party, like the Liberal Democrats, which are traditionally strong in local elections, as I said, was able to gain ground across the country. The Social Democrats not only recaptured several of these old bastions that are considered Brexit strongholds, as I mentioned before, and recently switched to the Tories. Some local authorities that have shown in Tory blue for decades, and I already mentioned East Staffordshire in the Midlands, are now gleaming in Labour red. And party leader Keir Starmer sees his party indeed on the way to a clear majority in Parliament. But, as I already mentioned, analysts were much more cautious about that one either. The broadcaster Sky News converted the results to a nationwide election, and the result was Labour would be the strongest party in Parliament, but the party that last governed until 2010 would not have its own majority. The Conservatives are already trying to capitalize on the poor result as well. It was quite hilarious sometimes when you listen to them. Tory Secretary General Greg Henn spoke of a massive wake-up call, and others even tried to sugarcoat the whole thing. But another winner, as I said, of the elections are the Liberal Democrats, led by Ed Davey. These are breakthrough the results that exceed predictions, said Davey, and many voters are angry with the Tories. Based on the polls, experts assume that the Conservatives could lose more than those 1,000 seats they now have already lost in the local elections. And I have to say this, it's Saturday morning now when I'm filming this, and still not all results are in. They already lost more than 1,000 seats, but there are a few council results still missing. So I decided to make the video now because much is in, but not everything. But I didn't want to do it too late after the election. But we had to wait a bit for the results, and it's still a clear picture. But I want to emphasize that again, and then summarize that. For the Tories, this is a bitter defeat. I said it in the beginning of the video. They more than half the number of council they were in control of. That is one major blow. And the other one is they lost more than 1,000 seats from 8,000 seats on an election. And they are really quite down. And Labour and the Tories both came from a bad result in the last local elections. It's not that there was a shining Tory victory in the last local elections and now they are just falling from an all-time high. They already had bad results last time and now they lost another 1,000 seats. But we have to stick to the truth, and that's why I'm coming back to the Sky News poll and the Sky News numbers there. I guess it was during the day when I was watching the results coming in and everything over and over again. It was about that Labour was kind of 8% in a lead over the Tories on Sky News during the day. England only, those were only local elections in England, so it's not the general election where every part of the UK is involved. But still, and it is not enough to say, oh, they have the best opportunity to get their own majority now. If on general election day that happens what happened now, it more looks like they would have something in the UK they are not very used to. They would be the strongest party and Keir Starmer would become Prime Minister, but with a minority government or a coalition government, but not with an own majority. So they still have to work and cannot get complacent or whatever now. They have a lot of hard work ahead of them. All they can wish for is that the right wing of the Tory party is doing what I talked about in a little bit in the video, that they are starting to attack Sunak now. That would be a dream for Starmer to have more infighting in the Tory party. That would help Starmer get his own majority. But to sum it up, it was a major blow and a crushing defeat for the Tory party, but it was not this overall shining victory for Labour. They gained grounds in important places. Well, they even lost one council, but there you see why I love to be in local politics myself. Probably many of you will have heard of Slough because the Tories will talk about this a lot because that's a council they took from Labour. And but for this you really need to know the background story. They got tax exemptions and then they filed for bankruptcy. And of course, if Labour would be in charge in that time, even if I were a Labour member, I wouldn't vote for Labour in that situation, in that council. And so that was definitely not the sign that the Tories are doing such a good job that they can win in other places when they lose in the others. No, that was a very, very local issue there where Labour locally messed up a lot. That's my point of view. And that's why the Tories could win there. But they couldn't have done it anywhere without big local issues like this. And so that's no sign for anything. But as I said earlier, some are really trying to sugarcoat that result because some experts said they could lose up to 1,000 seats. And when I heard people on TV talk from the Conservative Party talking about, yeah, we're just within the prediction, so it's not a bad result. Yeah. First, it was the upper end of what the experts ever expected as the worst case in these elections, and they even exceeded that. They crossed the 1,000 seat loss mark. And so sometimes it's really ridiculous when people try to sugarcoat a result like this. I really wish sometimes politicians would recognize a defeat, which is a defeat. And I know politicians that do that, by the way, but not in this election. Nevertheless, this election has some important markers, but it's not given us a very clear prediction for the general election, and that's the important point in this one. And if the Tory party still hasn't learned anything from this election, there's nothing that can help them. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.